Every year, the United States is ravaged by wildfires that destroy homes, decimate farmland, and annihilates hundreds of acres of natural forests. For those who like to prepare, there are ways we can mitigate damage. And we can do that by working with the land we've already got, by shaping and constructing it around us in such a way that we can build defenses to completely stop the flames in their tracks, or at the very least, minimize the damage as much as we possibly can. Everyone should be doing what they can to save lives and preserve productive land with our defenses. If you thought we sound like we're preparing for a war, you're not wrong. The wildfires that gripped the United States in 2025 were at a level of destruction that we've never seen before. Between Arizona, Texas, and New Mexico, we've lost 10,000 acres to the burning. But none was hit harder than California. 57,000 acres burned to ashes across the state was the last tally, and there's no telling how much more was damaged that hasn't been reported. We did a video some time ago about why wildfires are so much worse in our modern age than it was 50 years ago. We'll link that for you in the description box. But to make a long story short, humans are the reason for it. Is that even surprising anymore? But luckily, humans can fix it too. You've just got to know how to go about the affair with planning and purpose. So let's get into it. Before we start, this is an agricultural channel, so we'll be going at this from an angle to protect farmland, not directly focusing on preserving towns, cities, and villages. But that doesn't mean that the principles can't be applied to your home. If you can protect the ground surrounding the structure itself, you're already doing almost everything necessary to do so. Fortifying the ground is also much cheaper, and in most ways more effective than constructing the building with fire-resistant materials. Don't get us wrong, if you can afford to build with stone and metal roofing, instead of the usual kindling that structures are made from nowadays, you absolutely should. But the reality of the matter is that not all of us can afford brick, stone walls, or fire-rated doors and windows. With that said, let's start with the most labor-intensive but cheapest options and work our way up from there. Livestock. The first line of defense is the space around your property, not on the actual grounds itself. If you can keep the fire from reaching your fence line at all, or to burn with less ferocity if it does, then you have a shot at controlling the blaze, or avoiding it completely. Livestock to clear the dead, dried, and highly flammable top layer of the forest or growth around your property is the best and most effective way to get a fire to burn out for lack of fuel. It's that dry layer that's not being cleared enough that's causing most of our uncontrollable blazes, because there just isn't enough animal life to clear it out anymore. We've essentially locked forests off from the world in our efforts to preserve them, without thinking that some of it actually needs to be cleared out every once in a while. We go into the subject much more in depth in that video we mentioned earlier, so go check it out if you have more questions about the growing dry matter that's just laying there waiting to catch on fire. But for now, let's get back to the livestock. By running animals into the dense growth that surrounds your property, they're eating the top layer and packing down whatever's left with their hooves and manure. By trampling it and weighing it down with manure and urine, they're forcing out the air pocket between dead brush, depriving any flame of oxygen if it does meet a spark. You don't need to own any livestock to make this a possibility either. There is never a shortage of people out there who want to feed their animals for free. They'll be scrambling to let their goats, sheep, and cattle have a few free meals for a couple of days. That's all it will require from you. Just a few days, twice a year, is all you need to put up with. Most herders will come with their own temporary fencing, or a shepherd that stays with the flock to keep them off your land, so that they can focus on the few yards around the place. A herd of goats or sheep only needs 2 or 3 days to clear the lower layer without completely stripping the place bare of anything green. Obviously, it's going to depend on how big your property is, how much is growing, how much is built up, and the size of the herd you're running around your place. But all you need to really think about is to not keep them in that space for too long. It's not like you want to clear the place of every single plant, destroying the ecosystem. You just want them to nibble the lower growing food down and leave some good fertilizer for the new growth when they leave. The point is to have your top layer green, not dry and brown. Do some spring cleaning. Now that we've cleared the space beyond your property line, let's move on to the space on your land. Anyone with any size of acreage will tell you that there's at least one spot on the property that's become a scrapyard for broken tools and vehicles. Maybe there's a corner where you throw all of your garden refuse that you plan to remove later, but you never seem to get to it, and the pile just keeps growing. Or that shed that's been standing empty for the last couple of years, because you keep putting off fixing it. Somewhere there's a pile of junk that's got something in it that's just asking to catch a light. Clearing your property up is going to give you a perspective of just how much flammable materials that you have lying around. And that includes the natural junk too. Dead tree trunks, bits of scrap wood from a long forgotten building project, brush and scrubs that have lived their lives for the season and are just lying there rotting away. All of it is a potential fire hazard. If you can't remove it, then at least throw a layer of soil over the dead bushes and scrap wood. They'll decompose into the ground, giving it some nutrients, and they'll be too deep to light up. Organization. Next up is the job of organizing your fields, gardens, and the holdings for your animals. As much as we hold the chaos that comes with farming on any kind of scale, You just have to get organized if you have any chance of keeping a fire from spreading. Plan your structures and plantings in such a way that there's a few feet in between every section of your land. Flames spread because they jump from one area to the next. As long as there's fuel within reach, it will spread. Get some empty space in between the flame magnet fields and stand a chance to stop a blaze in its tracks. To keep fuel from growing in those empty strips, hardscapes like gravel, cobblestones, footpaths, walls, or even water features are a good way to keep them bare fodder. And when we say water features, we don't necessarily mean a pretty fountain or a swimming pool, though they'll both work great too. You can also leave your water pipes that go out to the fields in those strips. Flames can't cross water, and unless there's actual lava flowing over the place, then it's not crossing stone either. Stone or gravel mulch between garden beds isn't our personal favorite way to mulch a garden. But unfortunately, for those living in the wildfire belt, this is the best way to choke out weeds. Any organic, biodegradable mulch is just another fire hazard. Just one day without watering it, and you've got a carpet of dry grass, hay, wood chips, or peat moss, all items used for kindling on any given day. So no organic mulch for you we're afraid. It's better to lose a few yards of productive soil than it is to lose the entire property all in one event. Now, isn't it? Plant smart. Not all plants are easily ignitable. The plants directly in front of the buildings you're trying to preserve can do a lot of the protecting for you. Take cacti, for instance. They're just too good at storing water that there's just not enough dry matter for a flame to catch onto. A line of cacti and succulents are going to be as effective as a stone path to create a barrier for a fire to die on. More decorative plant varieties with high moisture content include all of the liriope varieties. Queen mums are a moisture-retentive flower, while weeping myrtle, viburnum, and watergun bushes are all high water content shrubs and bushes that are adapted to hotter climates and therefore very good at keeping an unusually high amount of water in their leaves and branches. It's not like they can't burn at all, but they're going to act a lot like the cacti when they're subjected to heat. They sort of just melt in place instead of going up in a blaze and spreading their coals and burning scraps with the wind. So if you absolutely need a privacy barrier between buildings, they're the best option at hand. California lilac, yarrow, cotoneaster, rock rose, lavender, sage, and manzanita are a few other good decorative plants to consider. Some of them make good ground covers too, if you're really trying to avoid putting down hard mulch. But on the flip side, junipers, cattails, sagebrush, and pampas grass, especially during droughts, are exceptionally fast burning. So avoid those if you can. Trees are a little more tricky. We'd always advocate for people to plant more trees, not less. Unfortunately, any tree that's subjected to enough heat will burn like a candle if it's undergoing a dry season. Besides watering them regularly to keep their moisture content high, keep their bases clean of dead leaves, pine needles, and twigs. Also plant them with purpose, with the appropriate spacing between each tree. Don't allow flames to jump from one tree to the next. Give them room to stay safe. It's going to be better for their roots to spread out, and they won't be fighting each other for nutrients anyway. A well-maintained lawn that's watered regularly and that always gets its weekly haircut on time is an even better strip than pathways and cacti. A lawn can stretch for several yards, giving you the optimal distance between the inferno and your home. But a neglected lawn with lots of overgrowth is a death trap. Those flames will shoot so high and burn so hard and hot that it won't just reach the building. It's going to blow flakes of burning material to neighboring fields and buildings. A neat lawn can save you, but an overgrown one can kill you. And this counts for every bush or hedge you have. Keep them pruned and free of dry matter at all times. A wayward branch that's thrown off its leaves is practically a fuse if you allow it to be. Top tips. When we mentioned spacing earlier, there's a little more to it than just leaving a bare strip in between plantings. It's about avoiding the ladder effect. Essentially, the ladder effect is when a fire comes through, ignites the grass, crawls up to the bushes, and then climbs to the hedges, until it finally reaches the tippy tops of the trees, and eventually your house. In other words, allowing a fire to climb both in height as well as in ferocity. So give that chaos garden a proper overhaul and get any overcrowding out of the way. Give every plant, tree, and shrub a few feet of room to avoid close contact spreading. Then we know we said we weren't going to get into constructing the buildings with flame retardant materials because most of us can't afford it and the majority of our viewers won't be dealing with any immediate neighbors. But that doesn't mean that you won't have a shed, a greenhouse, or a barn in close proximity to each other. It won't hurt to mention a few options. Now, would it? Just painting your buildings with flame retardant paint could be the last line of defense if the fire does cross over all the waterways, empty strips, and hard mulch you put down. It's the cheapest of the construction materials on the table. There are paints on the market that won't burn at all. Instead, the water-based paint reacts to heat and sucks up the oxygen instead of catching on fire. The company that makes it is called Firecoat. Go check them out. It's an amazing product. Some of the more expensive ones, like tile or shingle roofing, don't have to be bought and installed in one go either. Buy the materials over time, spacing out the purchases. Save up for the installation while you're collecting the tiles or the windows. You might not be able to have the roof this year or even next year. Another big cost method is to build your house with brick or stone. Like we said, this is a massive financial undertaking that most of us can't put down. But what about a stone wall? Building even a low wall around your property from locally sourced, uncut stone and cement is going to be a huge undertaking in terms of labor, but a fraction of the cost of constructing a building out of it. Large acreages will be too big to completely surround with a brick wall, but the home and the barn that hold your vehicles and expensive tools can at least be surrounded. Besides being a good way to stop fire in its tracks, getting your high-value equipment and animals behind safe walls is also a good deterrent for theft and vandalism. Then, there are alternative ways to build homes and structures that are naturally fire resistant. Green roof housing and cob houses are some of the cool, low-cost ways to build homes that are the most fire-resistant way to build any kind of structure. Cob homes are exponentially cheaper to build, though it will require quite a bit of labor from you. What we're trying to say is, start thinking outside of the conventional construction box. Our current way of building houses with plywood and pine was brought forth to build a lot of housing for a lot of people and in the quickest and cheapest way possible. Almost every home in the United States built after the 80s wasn't meant to last more than 30 years at most. It was the quickest and cheapest solution to give people a roof over their heads so that we could buy ourselves a bit of time to figure out a more permanent solution. Unfortunately, that inexpensive and highly flammable way of building has now become the norm, and we're under the impression that it's the only way we can and should build anything. This cannot be farther from the truth. Look at alternate ways of constructing. Anything is better than standard plywood and plaster walls. Those are just infernal ovens waiting to boil anything inside to cinders. And last on the docket is controlled burning. As much as it sounds like an insane idea, it really isn't, and people have been doing it for centuries. So just hear us out for a second. In the event that you can't have animals trample and eat the top dry kindling on the forest floor, then another way to get rid of it is by controlled burning, setting small, manageable fires as a team comes in from behind to put them out. Not only is there no dry matter to catch on fire anymore, this puts a great deal of biological matter back into the soil, and it manages invasive weeds. This isn't something that you should do yourself though. You need to bring professional teams in for this kind of thing to ensure that you're not causing a statewide, uncontrollable fire because you didn't know what you were doing. A few hundred years ago, small-scale forest fires were commonplace, and lightning took care of the dry matter all by itself. Naturally, there were more animals on American plains, and the fires very rarely stretched more than 2 or 3 acres at a time before they burned themselves out, thanks to all of that animal activity. They also rarely got hot enough to set trees on fire. Now we have to do it manually. And like we said, there are teams out there doing just that. But the population, after decades of being told that all fire is bad, is being very wary of inviting the practice in. And if you are still suspicious about the practice of controlled burning, it's still being done down in Africa and South America all the time, who arguably have much more dry matter on the ground than we do during dry seasons. And we don't hear about apocalyptic level wildfires that engulf entire regions and states, now do we? Despite all of this, there's still the very real possibility that you've done all you can and that firestorm reaches your property line anyway. Under good conditions, you could have a day or two to evacuate. If you have the time, get your mower out and start going ham. Starting at your fence line, or just beyond it, clear out as many yards of any plants and grasses as your gas tank will allow, and that includes the crop field. 4 or 5 feet of empty space is better than nothing, but obviously, the more you can get cleared, the better. A mower is the one big money item we'll insist that you buy. The maintenance it'll do throughout the year alone is a fire retardant exercise in and of itself. Keep the hoses going, saturating as much of the ground as you can, while you can. The moment you get that fire notice, and there's a chance that it could reach you, even if the fire's still weeks away, make sure that every inch of your property is as soaked as you can make it. If you're forced to evacuate, leave the sprinklers on. The farther the water can spread, the better. Your water bill is going to be sky high, but we can promise you that it'll still be cheaper than rebuilding an entire house from the ground up. The role of fire in landscape and soil health. While fire is often seen as destructive, it plays a crucial role in maintaining ecological balance and soil health. Controlled burns or prescribed fires have been used for centuries to rejuvenate landscapes and improve soil conditions. When managed properly, fire helps recycle nutrients, reduce invasive species, and create conditions that support biodiversity. Fire accelerates the decomposition of organic matter, returning essential nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium to the soil. Studies have shown that prescribed burns increase phosphorus availability, which is critical for plant growth. Additionally, fire helps regulate plant competition by reducing overgrown vegetation and invasive species, allowing native plants to thrive. The heat from fire also influences soil properties, often increasing soil pH and making nutrients more accessible to plants. Research indicates that prescribed burns can have lasting positive effects on soil composition, improving conditions for seed germination and plant resilience. Furthermore, regular, controlled burns reduce the buildup of combustible material, lowering the risk of devastating wildfires. By strategically incorporating fire into land management, Ecosystems can become more resilient, fostering healthier soil, diverse plant life, and sustainable landscapes. If an entire neighborhood all applied these simple tips and tricks, an entire line of fire could be stopped from spreading to the rest of the city. And if you can cut the blaze short at your property line, you too could be saving hundreds of acres of land alongside your own. It's not just you who's in danger of losing everything. It's the people and the lands in your property's wake too, and the generations after you on top of that. Do what you can, and as much as you can, to protect yourself and the community around you. To all those who lost their homes and loved ones, stay strong, good luck, and know that our thoughts are with you. And to those who are preparing for next year, get cracking. Before you know it, 2026 will be here. It's never too early to start.